The leader of the black armored group stepped forward. 20 years we've waited for this moment. The great sentinel, reduced to a schoolgirl. Jisoo gripped the metal rod tighter, her mind filled with combat techniques she had never learned. "Professor, stay down," she said, her voice steady and commanding. The intruders spread out. Jisoo watched their movements, calculating distances and angles. She knew she couldn't win against 3 armed attackers, but she might create a chance to escape. Suddenly, the lights went out. In the darkness, Jisoo moved. She rolled forward, struck the nearest intruder in the knee, and grabbed his weapon as he fell. Academy security alarms blared louder. The sound of running feet echoed in the hallway. "We need to leave," said one of the intruders. "More security is coming." "Not without completing the mission," said the leader, firing at where Jisoo had been a moment before. But she had already moved. The weapon in her hands felt familiar. She fired twice, not to kill, but to drive them back. Security officers burst into the room. The intruders turned and fled through a side door. "Are you hurt?" asked a security officer, helping Professor Deck to his feet. "We're fine," said Professor Deck. He looked at Jisoo with new respect, thanks to Jisoo's quick thinking. The security team wanted them to stay for questioning, but Professor Deck pulled rank. "This student needs medical attention," he insisted. "I'm taking her to my private facility." 20 minutes later, they were on a small fast ship leaving the Academy station. "Where are we going?" asked Jisoo. "To my research station," said Professor Deck. "It's safe there. We can talk freely." Jisoo stared out the viewport, watching the Academy shrink behind them. "Those attackers knew who I was. They called me the Sentinel." Professor Deck nodded. "The Tyron Empire lost everything because of you, because of Sun Hee Park. Many still seek revenge." "But I'm not her," said Jisoo. "At least I don't feel like I am." "Your body responded with her training," said Professor Deck. "Your mind is remembering, whether you want it to or not." They arrived at a small station hidden in an asteroid field. Inside, it looked more like a home than a research facility, with comfortable furniture and walls lined with real paper books. Professor Deck led Jisoo to a room filled with medical equipment. At the center was a chair with a strange helmet attached to it. "This is a memory recovery system," he explained. "It can help lift the suppression on your memories, safely and gradually." Jisoo touched the helmet hesitantly. "What if I don't want to remember? What if I just want to be Jisoo Kim, normal student?" Professor Deck's expression softened. "That choice was taken from you the moment the Tyron loyalists found you. They won't stop hunting you now." Jisoo knew he was right. She sat in the chair. "Will it hurt?" "No," said Professor Deck, attaching sensors to her temples. "But it may be emotionally difficult. The memories of Sun Hee Park are not all pleasant ones." He activated the machine. A gentle hum filled the room. Jisoo closed her eyes. Images flooded her mind, not dreams this time, but clear memories. She saw Earth under attack, alien ships in the sky, cities burning. She saw herself, older, harder, leading Earth's defense, planning strategies, winning impossible victories. She remembered the first time she was called the Sentinel, after destroying a Tyron fleet that threatened to wipe out humanity. She remembered years of war, friends lost, hard choices made, the weight of billions of lives depending on her decisions. When Professor Deck finally turned off the machine, Jisoo opened her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. "I remember now," she said quietly. "I am Sun Hee Park, but I'm also Jisoo Kim." "Both are true," said Professor Deck. "Your consciousness was preserved after the war. They placed it in a younger clone body, your current body, with your memories suppressed. They wanted to give you a normal life after all you had sacrificed." "The exchange program was never real, was it?" asked Jisoo. "No," admitted Professor Deck. "Your parents on Earth were agents assigned to protect you. Your placement at the Academy was arranged by Human Intelligence Services, who have been watching over you for years. Jisoo, Sunhee, stared at her young hands. Why am I remembering now? Why after all this time? Because, said Professor Deck grimly, the peace you won is ending. And I fear the galaxy needs the Sentinel once more. Jisoo Kim stared out the viewport as the transport ship glided toward Nexus Station. The massive ring-shaped space station glittered against the darkness, home to the famous Galactic Academy. Her heart beat faster. After months of tests and paperwork, she was finally here, the first human exchange student in 5 years. All humans prepare for docking procedures, announced a flat, artificial voice. Jisoo clutched her small bag tighter. At 17, she had never left Earth before. Now she was light years away, about to study with the brightest young minds from across the galaxy. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of chaos. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the arrival hall. Some had blue skin, others had 4 arms or eyes on stalks. One floated like a jellyfish above the crowd. A tall, thin alien with silver skin approached her. Human Jisoo Kim, it asked, checking a screen. Yes, that's me, she answered. I am Administrator Pax. Follow me to orientation. The hallways of the academy were wide and gleaming. Jisoo tried not to stare at the other students, but she couldn't help it. They stared back, some with curiosity, others with what looked like disgust. Your living quarters, said Pax, stopping at a door. Your roommate is already inside. The door slid open to reveal a being with purple-tinted skin and silver hair that moved like water. The alien looked up from a floating screen and frowned. This is my roommate, a human. The voice was musical but cold. Orivex of Veltrax, meet Jisoo of Earth, said Pax before walking away. Orivex looked Jisoo up and down. They said I would have an interesting roommate, not a primitive. Jisoo bit her lip. I'm not primitive. I passed the same entrance exams you did. A statistical error, no doubt. Orivex waved a hand dismissively. Your kind barely mastered space travel a century ago. My species was building wormhole generators while yours was still learning to make fire. Jisoo unpacked her things in silence. That night, she dreamed of stars exploding and ships burning. She woke up confused and sweating. Classes started the next day. In advanced physics, Jisoo sat alone while other students whispered and pointed. Today we will examine quantum propulsion systems, announced Professor Zell, a being who resembled a tall insect. Who can explain the basic principles? Jisoo raised her hand without thinking. The human wishes to answer. Professor Zell sounded surprised. Very well. Quantum propulsion works by creating paired particle states across space. Jisoo began. The words came easily, though she couldn't remember learning them. The drive creates quantum entanglement between the ship's matter and distant space-time points, then collapses the wave function to pull the vessel forward. The room fell silent. That is correct, said Professor Zell. Surprisingly detailed. Later, in the dining hall, Orivex and her friends cornered Jisoo. Did you memorize that answer to show off? Asked Orivex. Or perhaps humans are good parrots. A tall, rock-like student laughed. Look at her bones. So fragile. One bump, and they would break. And that thin skin, added another. No natural armor at all. Jisoo tried to eat quickly, eyes down. I heard humans need 8 hours of unconsciousness every day just to function, said Orivex loudly. Biological inefficiency at its finest. That evening, in tactical simulations class, the students were paired for exercises. No one wanted Jisoo as a partner. I'll work with the human, said a quiet voice. An older teacher with gray skin and wise eyes stood nearby. I am Professor Deck. During the simulation, Jisoo instinctively made moves that surprised even herself. She positioned virtual ships in patterns that Professor Deck found fascinating. Where did you learn this formation? he asked. I don't know, Jisoo admitted. It just felt right. Professor Dake watched her closely. Interesting. That night, Jisoo dreamed again, of battle plans and fleets of ships moving at her command. When she woke, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had been someone else, somewhere else, long ago. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Jisoo worked quickly. She pulled survival gear from the shuttle and set up a small shelter against the rock formation. Her hands moved with confidence, as if they had done this many times before. Using parts from the damaged radio, she built a stronger emergency beacon. Then she carefully patched the shuttle's air leak to preserve what oxygen remained. All the while, her mind felt strange, like someone else was guiding her actions. Night on the moon was bitterly cold. Jisoo huddled in her shelter, wrapped in thermal blankets. As she drifted in and out of sleep, the dreams came again, clearer than ever. She saw herself standing on the bridge of a massive warship. Officers in uniform waited for her orders. A huge battle raged outside the viewports. She heard herself speak in a voice of command. "Bring the fleet around to Sector 7. Spring the trap now." Jisoo woke with a start, her heart racing. The dream had felt so real, like a memory. Maybe Professor Dake is right, she whispered to herself. On the third day, Jisoo spotted movement on the horizon. A strange creature with 6 legs and thick fur was approaching her camp. It looked hungry. Without thinking, Jisoo grabbed a piece of metal from the shuttle wreckage and bent it into a makeshift weapon. She positioned herself behind a rock, planning an ambush with the skill of a trained soldier. The creature came closer. As it rounded the rock, Jisoo struck, quick and precise. The creature fell, dead from a single blow to a vulnerable spot she somehow knew to target. "How did I do that?" she asked aloud, staring at her hands. She had never fought anything before, at least not in this life. Later that day, Jisoo spotted a rescue shuttle approaching. Relief washed over her, but it was mixed with new wariness. What if the same person who sabotaged her shuttle had sent this one? The rescue ship landed nearby. The door opened, and Professor Dake stepped out, followed by 2 Academy security officers. "Jisoo," called Professor Dake. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she replied. "How did you find me?" "Your emergency beacon," said one of the officers. "Very impressive work. Most students wouldn't know how to modify a standard beacon for increased range." Professor Dake gave Jisoo a knowing look but said nothing. Back at the academy, Jisoo was taken to the medical bay for examination. Doctors marveled at her condition. 3 days on that moon should have left you half dead, said the head doctor, checking her vital signs. But you're in perfect health. How is that possible? Jisoo had no answer. At least, not one she could share. News of her survival spread quickly through the academy. Students looked at her differently now, with curiosity and even a hint of respect. Even Orivex seemed less hostile. The academy board is investigating the sabotage. Professor Dake told her later in his office. Lenko has been detained for questioning. Good, said Jisoo. Then she lowered her voice. Professor, while I was on the moon, I had more dreams. And I did things I shouldn't know how to do. Professor Dake nodded. Your true self is starting to break through. The survival situation triggered old instincts. Before Jisoo could respond, an alarm blared. The second in a week. But this time, the announcement was different. Security breach in Section 4. Armed intruders detected. All students remain in secure areas. Professor Dake's face went pale. They're here for you. Who? Asked Jisoo. Tyran loyalists, said Professor Dake. They never accepted defeat. If they've learned that the Sentinel has returned. The door to the office burst open. 3 aliens in black armor stood in the doorway, weapons raised. Sun Hee Park, said the leader, aiming at Jisoo. The Sentinel. Your deception ends today. Time seemed to slow down. Jisoo felt something change inside her mind, like a door unlocking. Without conscious thought, She flipped the desk, creating a barrier. In the same motion, she pulled Professor Dyke down for cover. The intruders fired. Energy bolts hit the overturned desk. Jisoo grabbed a decorative metal rod from the wall and held it like a weapon. "I am not who you think I am," she said, but her voice sounded different even to her own ears, older, commanding. The leader laughed. "Your body is young, but those movements don't lie. Only the Sentinel fights like that." In that moment, Jisoo knew he was right. She was remembering, and there was no going back. 3 months passed at the Galactic Academy. Jisoo's life fell into a pattern. She excelled in her classes but remained an outsider. Each small victory in the classroom brought more resentment from her alien classmates. "It must be luck," Orivex often said when Jisoo scored highest on tests. Or perhaps the teachers feel sorry for the primitive human. But Jisoo knew it wasn't luck. Sometimes knowledge simply appeared in her mind, especially during tactical simulations and engineering problems. It was as if she had done all this before. The dreams continued too. Each night, she saw flashes of space battles, heard voices calling her by a different name, and felt the weight of command on her shoulders. She always woke feeling both tired and strangely alert. One morning, Professor Dake made an announcement to the Tactical Studies class. "Tomorrow, we will visit the Nexus Museum of Galactic History," he said. "We will study the exhibits on the Great Tyrun War that ended 20 years ago." Jisoo felt a strange chill at the mention of the war. "The Tyrun War shaped our current galactic peace," continued Professor Dake. "Understanding it is key to understanding our present." That night, Jisoo's dreams were more vivid than ever. She saw massive fleets moving according to her commands. She heard herself giving orders in a voice that sounded older, more confident. She woke up with a pounding headache and a name on her lips: Sunhee. The next day, the class boarded a shuttle to the museum. It was housed in a giant dome with holographic displays floating throughout the space. Professor Dyke led them to the Tyrun War section. "The war lasted 15 years," explained the museum guide, a 4-armed alien with smooth blue skin. "The Tyrun Empire tried to conquer half the galaxy. They almost succeeded until the Sentinels stopped them." Jisoo finished without thinking. Everyone turned to look at her. The guide blinked all 4 of her eyes. "Yes, that's correct," said the guide. "Though that information comes later in the tour." Jisoo felt her face grow hot. How did she know that? As they moved through the exhibits, Jisoo experienced a powerful sense that she had seen all this before, not in pictures or videos, but in person. It made no sense. She had been born years after the war ended. They stopped at a display of weapons. "This is a collection of Tyrun battle technology," said the guide. "Most of it is still not fully understood." Jisoo stared at a strange device in the center. It was labeled "Purpose Unknown." "That's wrong," she said quietly. "Excuse me." The guide looked confused. "That's a quantum field disruptor," said Jisoo, pointing at the device. "It doesn't destroy ships. It creates micro-wormholes that scatter their atoms across space. The Tyrun used them at the Battle of Proxima Centauri. They were banned after that because they caused too much suffering." Silence fell over the group. Even Orivex looked shocked. "How could you possibly know that?" asked the guide. "That information is classified. Even I didn't know its purpose." Jisoo shook her head. I don't know. I just do." Professor Dake was watching her with intense interest. When the other students moved to the next exhibit, he pulled Jisoo aside. "That was remarkable, Jisoo," he said quietly, "but troubling. That information is known only to high-level military historians. I can't explain it," she replied, her hands shaking. "It just came to me, like I was there." Professor Dake looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Have you been having strange dreams, perhaps memories that don't seem like yours?" Jisoo's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "I have a theory," he said, "but I need to run some tests first. Meet me in my laboratory after classes tomorrow. And Jisoo, tell no one about this conversation. As they rejoined the group, Jisoo noticed Orivex watching her with new eyes, not mocking now, but cautious and perhaps a little afraid. That night, for the first time, Jisoo dreamed not of battles but of a mirror. In it, she saw not her own face, but that of an older woman with the same eyes. The woman looked tired but determined. "Remember," the woman in the mirror whispered. But Jisoo woke before she could hear what she was supposed to remember. "We need to move," said Professor Dake, grabbing a small bag from under his desk. "That ship could be anyone, but I don't want to take chances." Jisoo followed him through a back door that led to a narrow service corridor. Her mind was racing with questions, but there was no time to ask them. "There's a training shuttle bay nearby," said Professor Dake. "We can hide there until we know who's on that ship." They reached the shuttle bay just as another announcement came over the speakers. "False alarm. Security situation resolved. All students may resume normal activities." Professor Dake frowned. That was too quick. "Maybe it really was nothing," suggested Jisoo. "Perhaps," said Professor Dake, but he didn't look convinced. "In any case, we should continue our discussion elsewhere. The Academy has too many eyes and ears." Jisoo looked at the training shuttles lined up in the bay. "I have pilot training tomorrow. My first solo flight." "Perfect," said Professor Dake. "During your flight, head to these coordinates." He pressed a small data chip into her hand. "I have a private research station there. We can talk safely." Jisoo put the chip in her pocket. "I still don't believe I'm this Sentinel person." "Belief is not required," said Professor Dake with a small smile. "The truth remains the truth either way." The next day, Jisoo prepared for her first solo training flight. The instructor, a tall blue alien named Kex, checked her pre-flight preparations. "Remember," said Kex, "stay within the approved flight path. The shuttle's navigation system is pre-programmed to keep you safe." Jisoo nodded, but she could feel the data chip in her pocket like a burning coal. She was not yet sure if she would use it. As she ran through the final checks, she noticed a shadow moving between the shuttles. It was Lenko, a student who particularly hated Jisoo after she had outperformed him in several classes. Jisoo thought about reporting him but decided it wasn't worth the trouble. He was probably just curious about the shuttles. She climbed into the cockpit and started the engines. The shuttle hummed to life around her. Somehow, the controls felt familiar, like she had flown much larger ships before. "Shuttle 5, you are cleared for departure," said the control tower. Jisoo guided the shuttle out of the bay and into open space. The stars spread out before her, endless and beautiful. For a few minutes, she simply enjoyed the flight, following the approved path. Then, without warning, the control panel flashed red. Warning alarms blared. "Shuttle 5, we're detecting a power surge in your engine," said a worried voice from the control tower. "Return to base immediately." Jisoo tried to turn the shuttle around, but the controls no longer responded. "Control, I've lost steering. Engines are not responding to commands." "Attempt to restart the system," ordered the controller. Jisoo tried, but nothing happened. Instead, the shuttle began to accelerate away from the station, toward a small moon. "Control, I'm on a collision course with the moon," she reported, fighting to keep her voice calm. "All systems are failing." She knew then that this was no accident. Someone had sabotaged her shuttle. An image of Lenko moving between the shuttles flashed in her mind. As the moon grew larger in her view screen, something strange happened. Jisoo's hands began moving over the controls with a speed and confidence that wasn't her own. She bypassed the main systems and accessed emergency protocols she hadn't been taught. The shuttle was still going to crash, but now she had some control over where. She aimed for a flat area near a rock formation that could provide shelter. The impact was hard. Jisoo's head hit the console, and everything went black. When she woke, the shuttle was dark and cold. Air was leaking slowly. She had maybe 3 days of oxygen left. Help will come, she told herself. But as she looked out at the barren moon surface, she knew rescue might not arrive in time. Something stirred in the back of her mind. Knowledge she shouldn't have. Survival skills. Military training. I guess we'll find out if Professor Duck is right, Jisoo whispered to herself as she began gathering supplies from the damaged shuttle. Within hours, the situation had completely changed. The Tyrun fleet was surrounded by ships from a dozen worlds, including many that had been targets of their propaganda. In the Galactic Council's emergency session, Jisoo stood before representatives of all species. Her dual nature, the wisdom of Sun-hee Park in the body of Jisoo Kim, made her uniquely suited to speak for both the past and the future. The Tyrun Empire sought war, she said, but today we choose peace. Her proposal was radical. Instead of destroying the Tyrun, offer them a place in a new galactic alliance. With their deception exposed, many Tyrun citizens themselves rose up against their military leaders. Later, as Jisoo prepared to return to the academy, not as a student but as its new strategic director, Professor Dake found her looking at the stars. "Are you Sun-hee or Jisoo now?" he asked. She smiled. "Both. Always both. Sun-hee brought empires to their knees through war. Jisoo will help build a lasting peace." In the academy halls where she had once faced mockery, students now studied her methods. The girl who had been ridiculed for her supposed weaknesses had saved them all by embracing both her humanity and her legacy. "My greatest victory," she told Professor Dake, "wasn't defeating the Tyrun. It was finding a better way forward." And among the stars, a new era began. Jisoo sat silently, trying to make sense of her two lives. The memories of Sun-hee Park were now clear in her mind. Decades of life, war, and sacrifice. Yet she was still physically a 17-year-old girl. "I need time to process this," she said finally. Professor Dake nodded. "Rest. We're safe here for now." That night, Jisoo slept better than she had in months. The dreams that had haunted her were gone, replaced by the quiet of acceptance. She now understood who she was. She woke to the sound of a ship docking. Alarmed, she rushed to the main room, where Professor Dak was greeting an old man in a simple gray uniform with human military insignia. "Jisoo," said Professor Dake, "this is Admiral Taho Lee." The old man stared at Jisoo with wide eyes. "It's true," he whispered. "You look just like her, like you did when I first met you, Sun-hee." Jisoo felt a rush of recognition. "You were my second in command, in the Battle of Proxima 7. Admiral Lee nodded, his eyes misting. "I was young then. A captain. You saved us all that day." They sat at a table while Admiral Lee explained why he had come. "After the war, the Tyrun Empire was defeated but not destroyed," he said. "We believed they had accepted peace, but they were just hiding, rebuilding in secret." "How bad is it?" asked Jisoo, her voice now carrying the authority of the Sentinel. "Very bad," said Admiral Lee. "They have a new fleet, new weapons, and they want revenge for their defeat." "Against who?" asked Jisoo. "Earth," said Admiral Lee grimly. "They plan to hit us first and hardest. Intelligence suggests they have a super weapon that could destroy the entire planet." Jisoo's fists clenched. "How long do we have?" 3 months, maybe less," said Admiral Lee. "That's why we've been looking for you. Humanity needs the Sentinel again." "But I'm not fully hurt," said Jisoo. "I have her memories, but I'm also just a student. I haven't commanded a fleet in 20 years. "Your tactical mind was unmatched," said Admiral Lee. "That hasn't changed, even if your body has." Before Jisoo could respond, an alert sounded. Professor Dake checked the security screens. "A ship is approaching," he said. "Academy markings." Jisoo tensed, ready for another attack. But when the ship docked and the door opened, it was Orivex who stepped through, looking frightened and determined. "Don't shoot," she said, raising her hands. I'm alone. How did you find us? Demanded Professor Dick. I placed a tracker on your shuttle, admitted Orivex. After the attack, I needed to know if what they said was true. If Jisoo is really the Sentinel. Jisoo stepped forward. Why do you care? Because my people, the Veltraxians, owe their freedom to the Sentinel, said Orivex. We were the first world the Tyrun tried to conquer. You saved us. Orivex's voice softened. My grandmother told me stories about you. How you outsmarted the Tyrun fleet with half their numbers. How you gave the evacuation ships time to escape. Jisoo remembered. The Battle of Veltrax had been early in the war, one of her first major victories. If you're really her, said Orivex, then I've been mocking the greatest hero my people have ever known. I was just doing my job, said Jisoo quietly. There's more, said Orivex urgently. The Academy is in chaos. The Tyrun agents who attacked you left a message. They said Earth will burn in 3 days, not 3 months. They're moving faster than you thought. Admiral Lee looked alarmed. That's not possible. Our intelligence was wrong, finished Jisoo. She turned to Admiral Lee. Contact Earth's defenses. Tell them to prepare for immediate attack. The old authority was back in her voice. Jisoo Kim was still there, but Sun Hee Park, the Sentinel, was now fully awake. What will you do? Asked Professor Dick. Jisoo looked at each of them. The professor who had helped her remember, the admiral who had served with her, and the alien student who had once mocked her but now looked at her with respect. What I was born to do, said Jisoo. Both times, I'll find a way to save Earth. She straightened her shoulders, and for a moment, they all saw not a teenage girl but the legendary commander who had once brought empires to their knees. But this time, she added, I won't do it alone. The next day crawled by slowly. Jisoo could hardly focus on her classes. Her mind kept going back to the museum, to the weapon she had identified, and to Professor Deck's strange questions. When classes finally ended, she hurried to Professor Deck's laboratory. It was in an older part of the station that few students visited. The door slid open as she approached. Come in, Jisoo called Professor Deck from inside. And please lock the door behind you. The lab was filled with old books, strange devices, and glowing screens. Professor Deck stood next to a chair that looked like it belonged in a medical bay. Please, sit down, he said, gesturing to the chair. Jisoo hesitated. What is this about, Professor? I believe you may be more than you seem. Jisoo Kim, he said. His voice was gentle but serious. Or should I call you by another name? A chill ran down Jisoo's spine. I don't understand. Professor Deck touched a screen, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a human woman in a military uniform. She looked to be in her late 30s, with short black hair streaked with gray and eyes that had seen too much. She looked strangely familiar. This is Commander Sun Hee Park, said Professor Deck, known to most as the Sentinel. She was the greatest military mind of the Tyrun War. Her strategies saved countless worlds, including Earth. Jisoo stared at the image. The woman's eyes were exactly like hers. 20 years ago, after the final battle, the Sentinel disappeared, continued Professor Deck. Some say she died. Others say she went into hiding. But I have a different theory. He touched the screen again, and the hologram changed to show various medical scans. These are your brain scans from your academy entrance exam, he explained. They show unusual patterns. Parts of your brain have been artificially suppressed, specifically parts related to memory. Jisoo felt dizzy. What are you saying? I believe you are Sun Hee Park, said Professor Deck. Either her consciousness was transferred to a younger body, or you were genetically created from her. Your memories were suppressed to protect you, and perhaps others. Jisoo shook her head. That's impossible. I grew up on Earth. I have parents, a home, memories of childhood. Are you certain those memories are real? Asked Professor Deck. Or were they implanted to give you a new identity? He handed her a small device. This is a DNA analyzer. May I? Reluctantly, Jisoo placed her finger on the device. It glowed briefly, then displayed results on the screen. As I suspected, said Professor Deck. Your DNA shows signs of advanced modification. Changes that would be illegal on most worlds. Changes designed to enhance strength, intelligence, and reflexes beyond human norms. Jisoo's hands began to shake. This can't be true. The knowledge you displayed at the museum about the quantum field disruptor was classified at the highest levels, said Professor Deck. Only someone who fought in the war would know those details. But I'm just 17, protested Jisoo. The war ended 20 years ago. Your body is 17, corrected Professor Deck. But your mind is much older, just buried beneath layers of suppression. Jisoo stood up suddenly. This is crazy. I need to go. Wait, said Professor Deck. I can help you recover your memories. Safely, gradually. Don't you want to know the truth? Jisoo paused at the door. And what if you're wrong? What if I'm just a normal girl who happens to know things I shouldn't? Then no harm done, said Professor Deck. But if I'm right, you need to be prepared. Because if I figured this out, others will too. And not everyone who remembers the Sentinel loved her. She made many enemies. As if to prove his point, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the station. A calm voice announced, "Security alert. Unauthorized vessel docking at Port 7. All students return to quarters immediately." Professor Deck's face grew pale. "It's starting already," he whispered. "They found you." The day of the mission arrived. Jisoo stood in the hangar bay, looking at the small transport ship they would use. It was unmarked and looked like a regular cargo vessel, perfect for their plan. Her team consisted of 12 students, each chosen for specific skills. Orivex was her second in command. Even Lenko had a role, using his knowledge of ship systems to help them bypass Tyrun security. "Remember," said Jisoo to the gathered team, "our mission is simple. Get to the Tyrun command ship, disable the superweapon, and broadcast the truth about their plans to the galaxy." Admiral Lee approached her. "Earth's defense fleet is on high alert, but they won't be able to help you where you're going." Jisoo nodded. "We'll succeed on our own." The Admiral handed her a small device. "This contains evidence of all Tyrun war crimes from the last conflict. Use it if you get the chance to broadcast." As they boarded the ship, Professor Deck gave Jisoo a final word of advice. "You have the mind of the Sentinel, but the heart of Jisoo Kim," he said. "Use both." The journey to the Tyrun base took 6 hours. As they approached, Jisoo activated the fake identification codes that Orivex had prepared. "Cargo ship Dawnstar requesting permission to dock," she transmitted, "delivering supplies." There was a tense moment of silence before the reply came. "Permission granted. Proceed to docking Bay 3. The plan was working. The Tyrun had no reason to suspect a small cargo ship. Once docked, 4 of the team stayed with the ship while the rest, disguised as various service workers, moved through the massive Tyrun flagship. "According to the schematics, the weapon control center should be 2 levels down," whispered Orivex. They moved quietly, avoiding patrols. Jisoo led them with confidence, her muscle memory recalling every tactic from her previous life. They reached the central corridor when an alarm suddenly blared. "Intruder alert. Security breach in Sector 7. "That's not us," said Jisoo. "Someone else must be here." A group of Tyrun soldiers rushed past, not noticing them in their service worker disguises. "Change of plan," said Jisoo. "We split up. Orivex, take half the team to the weapon control center. I'll take the rest to the communications hub." Orivex looked worried. "Are you sure?" "Trust me," said Jisoo, with a confidence beyond her years. The groups separated. Jisoo led her team through service corridors to the communications center. When they arrived, they found it lightly guarded. "Now, whispered Jisoo. They moved quickly, disabling the two guards without raising an alarm. Jisoo sat at the main console and began working, her fingers flying over the controls. "What are you doing?" asked Lenko. "This isn't part of the plan." "The plan changed," said Jisoo. "I'm accessing their entire network. Not just the weapon controls, but their communication systems, their propaganda machine, everything." As she worked, her mind fully merged her two identities. The tactical genius of Sun-hee Park combined with the fresh perspective of Jisoo Kim. She saw patterns she might have missed before, connections that weren't obvious. "There," she said, inserting Admiral Lee's data device, ready to broadcast. At that moment, the doors slid open, and a tall Tyrun commander stepped in, flanked by soldiers. "The Sentinel," he said, his voice cold. "We meet at last." Jisoo stood slowly. "You know who I am." "Of course. We've been tracking you since you left the academy. Did you really think we wouldn't recognize our greatest enemy?" Jisoo smiled. "I was counting on it." She pressed the final command. Across the ship, every screen lit up with images of Tyrun war crimes, alongside proof of their current propaganda campaign. "What have you done?" demanded the commander. "I'm not just broadcasting to your ship," said Jisoo. "This is going to every Galactic Council member, every neutral world, and every species you've tried to turn against humanity." The commander raised his weapon, but Lenko knocked it from his hand. At the same moment, another alarm sounded. "Weapon systems disabled," announced the ship's computer. Orivex's team had succeeded too. "3 days is not enough time to organize a proper defense," said Admiral Lee, his face grim. "Then we don't fight them directly," said Jisoo. "We need to find their superweapon and disable it." She paced the room, her young face focused with the intensity of a seasoned commander. "Orivex, what else do you know about the Tyrun plans?" she asked. "Not much," admitted Orivex. "But there's something else. After the attack at the academy, I did some research. My people have been getting strange messages recently. Offers of protection from coming human aggression." "Propaganda," said Jisoo immediately. "Classic Tyrun tactics. They did the same thing before the last war, turned other species against each other." Professor Dake frowned. "If they're spreading lies about human aggression, then it's not just Earth at risk," finished Jisoo. "They're setting up another galactic war." She turned to Admiral Lee. "We need to get back to the academy. Now." "The academy?" he asked, surprised. "Why there?" "Because that's where the best young minds in the galaxy are," said Jisoo. "And right now, we need all the help we can get." 2 hours later, their ship docked at the academy. Security was tight after the attack, but Admiral Lee's credentials got them through. Jisoo walked the halls differently now. She stood straight, moved with purpose. Students who had once mocked her now stared in confusion. In the main assembly hall, Professor Dake called an emergency meeting. Students from all species filed in, murmuring with curiosity and concern. When Jisoo stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. "My name is Jisoo Kim," she began. "But I am also Sun-hee Park. I am the Sentinel." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Some students laughed in disbelief. Others looked frightened. "You all know about the attack here 2 days ago," continued Jisoo. "What you don't know is that in 3 days, the Tyrun Empire plans to attack Earth with a superweapon." She let that sink in before continuing. "But this isn't just Earth's problem. The Tyrun are spreading lies about human aggression. They want to start another galactic war." A tall student stood up. "Why should we believe you?" Orivex stepped forward. "Because she's telling the truth. My own people are being fed these lies right now." Another student stood. "Even if this is true, why should we help? This is a military matter." "Because the academy was founded to bring species together," said Jisoo. "To learn from each other and build a better galaxy. If we let the Tyrun turn us against each other, everything the academy stands for will be lost." She looked around the room. I'm not ordering anyone to help. I'm asking. I need volunteers with skills in engineering, communications, and data analysis. We have 3 days to find and stop this weapon. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, hands began to rise. First a few, then dozens. Students from all species, even those who had once been harshest to Jisoo. Lenko, who had been released after questioning about the shuttle sabotage, stood up. I'll help, he said, his voice quiet with shame. I owe you that much. Jisoo nodded her acceptance. Thank you. They set up a command center in the Tactical Studies Lab. Students worked in shifts, analyzing data, tracking Terran communications, and searching for the superweapon. On the second day, a breakthrough came from an unlikely source. I found something, said Orivex, rushing into the command center. Remember how my people were getting propaganda messages? I traced their origin point. She pulled up a star map. All the messages are being routed through this system. It's supposed to be abandoned, but there's significant energy usage there. Jisoo studied the map, her eyes narrowing. That's it. That's where they're hiding. She turned to Admiral Lee. How many ships can Earth send? Not enough, he admitted, and they won't arrive in time. Jisoo smiled, a confident, dangerous smile that didn't belong on a teenager's face. Then we'll have to be smarter, not stronger, just like old times. She gathered her unlikely team around her, students who had once mocked her, now looking to her for leadership. Here's the plan, she said. We don't need to defeat their fleet. We just need to get aboard their command ship and disable the superweapon. And I know exactly how to do it. As she outlined her daring plan, the students listened with growing excitement. This was no classroom exercise. This was real, a chance to prevent a war that would consume the galaxy. It's risky, said Admiral Lee when she finished. Yes, agreed Jisoo, but it will work, because they'll never expect an attack from a group of students. She looked at the determined faces around her. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we save Earth, and perhaps the galaxy.